The day I lost my cake shop was the day I stopped being the dutiful daughter-in-law. I remember standing in my kitchen watching Diane's perfectly manicured fingers slide the contract across my granite countertop like she was dealing cards in a rigged game. "It's for the best, dear," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "The family business needs to be properly managed by professionals. I'm Meredith, and for the past 5 years, I've poured my heart and soul into Sweet Dreams Cakery. Every morning at 5 a.m., I'd unlock those doors, fire up the ovens, and create edible art with butter and sugar. The neighborhood children knew me by name, local couples trusted me with their wedding memories, and my signature designs had won regional competitions. None of that seemed to matter to Diane. "Mom, please," Trevor said, shifting uncomfortably beside me, running his fingers through his hair with that nervous habit I used to find endearing. "Can't we discuss this after Meredith's big order is finished? The timing isn't great." "There's nothing to discuss," Diane replied, tapping the paper with her crimson nail, the sound like a tiny hammer driving nails into my dream. "The shop needs proper business oversight. Meredith clearly needs help taking it to the next level." My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the counter, feeling the cool stone ground me as my emotions threatened to overflow. I've doubled our profits in the last 2 years and expanded our client base. The business is thriving without corporate interference. "Oh, sweetie," Diane's laugh felt like ice water down my spine, her eyes assessing my kitchen like she was already planning renovations. "Those little birthday cakes you make are charming, but this is about legacy. The Stevens family name deserves better than a neighborhood cake shop. We can franchise this concept across the state." I looked at Trevor, silently pleading for support, for any sign that he remembered the late nights we'd spent planning this place, choosing every fixture, testing recipes until dawn. He avoided my eyes, suddenly fascinated by the custom floor tiles I'd saved for months to afford when we renovated. "Trevor," I whispered, my voice catching in my throat, "please. This is our dream." He finally met my gaze, his face a battlefield of guilt and conflict. "Maybe Mom's right, Mare. The business guidance could help us expand. You're always saying you wish you had more time for the creative side." The betrayal burned in my chest. 5 years of marriage, countless promises of partnership, and here he was, choosing his mother's ambitions over our shared dreams yet again. "Sign it, dear." Diane pushed the paper closer, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Think of it as joining forces with a seasoned professional." My phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Julia at the shop. "Boss, the Anderson family is here early for the birthday cake consultation. The little girl is so excited. Should I start without you?" That message was my escape hatch. "I have to go," I said, grabbing my keys and apron, feeling a rush of relief. "There's a client waiting, an 8-year-old's birthday. This business conversation needs to be handled when I'm not in the middle of my workday." Diane called after me, "My contacts are expecting the paperwork by the end of the week, Meredith. This opportunity won't wait forever." I was already halfway out the door, but I caught Trevor's defeated sigh. "I'll talk to her, Mom. She'll come around when she sees the business plan." At the cake shop, I threw myself into work, designing a fairy castle birthday cake while Julia handled the consultation with the beaming parents and their wide-eyed daughter. My hands stayed steady even as my thoughts raced. Years of perfecting recipes, building relationships with suppliers, teaching local kids about baking, all about to be commercialized and stripped of personality by my mother-in-law's corporate vision. "You okay, boss?" Julia asked, wiping down the display case as we closed that evening, concern evident in her young face. "You've been quieter than usual today. That Anderson girl loved your design sketch, by the way." "I'm fine," I lied, organizing tomorrow's order forms with mechanical precision. Just tired. Thanks for handling things while I was delayed. Later that night, I sat at my desk reviewing the contract Diane had left behind. The terms were brutal. I'd retain a small ownership percentage, but all creative control would transfer to Stephen's properties. My recipes, my staff, my vision, all under Diane's corporate thumb. Trevor found me there at midnight, still poring over the legal jargon. "Honey, come to bed. We can figure this out tomorrow when we're both thinking clearly." "Figure what out?" I asked, not looking up, my fingers tracing the clause about standardizing product offerings. "How to surrender everything I've built to your mother's corporate machine." "Mom's just trying to help us grow the business," he said, massaging my shoulders tentatively. "She has connections we don't." "Stop." I finally faced him, shrugging away from his touch. "Your mother has never tried to help me. She's trying to control my business, like she controls every aspect of your life. This isn't about growth, it's about possession." His face hardened, that familiar defensive look whenever his mother was criticized. "That's not fair. She's built a successful business empire from nothing. Isn't it fair? When was the last time you made a decision about our future without calling her first? Our house, our vacation plans, even the car you drive, everything gets her approval." The silence between us stretched painfully. My phone lit up with an email notification, my monthly small business newsletter. I opened it absently, needing a distraction from the tension, and there it was, the headline that changed everything: "Local real estate market plummets. High-end commercial properties hit hardest." I clicked through, scanning until I found what I needed. Diane's precious development projects, her pride and joy, had lost nearly half their value. The same properties she'd showcased at every family gathering, the ones she'd leveraged to start Stephen's properties. Trevor was still talking, defending his mother with practiced ease, but I barely heard him. My mind was racing, connections forming like ingredients in a perfect recipe. I knew Diane's type, all appearance, no contingency plan. The market crash would devastate her, but she'd never admit vulnerability. She'd maintain her designer wardrobe and luxury car until the very end. I looked at my husband, still making excuses for his mother, and made my decision. If Diane wanted to play games with my livelihood, I'd show her exactly how it felt to lose everything you've worked for. "You're right," I said, cutting off his well-worn defense. "I'll sign the papers tomorrow." Trevor's relief was painful to witness, his shoulders relaxing as if a weight had been lifted. "Really? You mean it? Mom will be thrilled." Of course, I smiled, thinking of the separate business account I'd maintained since marriage, my safety net that Trevor knew nothing about. After all, it's what's best for the family business, right? Little did they know, I was about to redefine exactly what family business meant. The next morning, you did what? Allison nearly choked on her coffee, her eyes wide with disbelief. We were sitting in her small law office, where I'd gone straight after signing over my cake shop that morning, the ink barely dry on the contract. "I signed it," I said, my voice steadier than the turmoil inside me, "but I have a plan. A plan that doesn't involve anything illegal against my mother-in-law, I promise." She was only half joking as she raised her eyebrows in concern. I pulled out my phone and showed her the real estate listings I'd been researching. "I'm going to buy her house." Allison stared at me for a long moment, her legal training evident in the careful way she controlled her expression. "Okay, you need to back up and explain everything." And I mean everything. I told her about discovering Diane's financial vulnerability, about the market crash affecting her development projects, and my suspicions that she was using my cake shop to shore up her failing empire. "That's why she was so aggressive about getting control," I explained, leaning forward in my chair. She doesn't care about cakes or community, she needs my shop's steady income and solid reputation to keep up appearances and secure new financing. Allison leaned back in her chair, processing the information, tapping her pen against her notepad. And you're absolutely certain about her financial situation? This is a serious move, Meredith. Her younger son, Kyle, let it slip last week that she's been desperately trying to refinance her properties. He thought I knew already, being family and all. I couldn't suppress a bitter laugh that surprised even me. Diane's been hiding it well, but she's desperate. Her entire image is built on success. Even so, buying her house. I paused, feeling a mix of guilt and resolve. That's exactly the wake-up call she deserves. I finished my now cold coffee. Can you help me navigate this legally? Allison's expression shifted from professional concern to personal determination. Actually, I know someone who might be perfect for this situation. Let me call Warren. He specializes in exactly this kind of real estate transaction. 20 minutes later, a tall man in a tailored suit walked in. Allison greeted him with a quick, "Thanks for coming on short notice. It's urgent." He extended his hand to me. "I'm Warren Pierce. Meredith Stevens. And yes, I need to buy a house without the current owner knowing it's me." His eyebrows shot up, but he sat down without judgment as I explained the situation. He took careful notes in a leather-bound notebook, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "It's entirely doable," he said finally, closing his notebook with a decisive snap. "We can set up an LLC to make the purchase. My brother, Frank, is a real estate agent who specializes in discrete transactions. He can handle the actual purchase. Diane won't know you're involved until after the sale is complete and the deed is recorded." Perfect. I felt the first genuine smile in days spread across my face. "How soon can we start this process?" "I can have the LLC paperwork ready tomorrow, but Meredith," he paused, his expression serious, "this will inevitably get messy on a personal level. Are you truly prepared for the family fallout?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Trevor. "Mom wants us over for dinner Sunday. Says she has exciting plans for the cake shop's future. Please be open-minded." "I'm more than prepared," I said, showing them the message with a grim determination. "In fact, I'm counting on clearing the air once and for all." Later that afternoon, I was back at the cake shop, now technically working under Stevens Properties' oversight. Julia was carefully piping delicate flowers onto cookies, shooting me concerned glances every few minutes. "You seem different today," she said finally, setting down her piping bag. "Good different, but also, I don't know, determined different." I was about to respond when Kyle walked in, bringing with him the scent of leather jacket and his trademark casual energy. Trevor's younger brother had always been the family rebel, keeping a healthy distance from Diane's controlling influence. "Hey, sis," he grabbed a cookie from the display case, admiring the artistry before taking a bite. "Heard about the big corporate transition. You holding up okay?" "Just peachy," I replied, watching him carefully for any additional information. "How's your mom? Still trying to unload that massive house in Oak Ridge Estates?" "God, I wish she would," he snorted, licking frosting from his thumb. "She's too proud to admit she can't afford it anymore. The property taxes alone are bleeding her dry, but heaven forbid Diane Stevens downsize like a normal person." "That must be stressful for her," I said, keeping my tone neutral while filing away this confirmation. "Yeah, well," he shrugged, his photographer's eye scanning the shop appreciatively. "Maybe if she focused more on fixing her own financial problems instead of trying to control everyone else's businesses and lives." After he left, Julia turned to me. wiping flour from her hands onto her apron. "Did you see that look in your eye when he mentioned the house? What are you planning, boss?" "Let's just say some significant changes are on the horizon." I started gathering my purse and car keys. "Can you handle closing tonight? I have some important appointments to make." That evening, I met with Warren and his brother, Frank, at their downtown office. Frank had already pulled the property records and recent market analyses, spreading them across the conference table. "The timing couldn't be better," he said, pointing to the downward trends. "The market crash has scared off most potential buyers, and this house has been quietly listed for months. We can probably secure it for well below asking price." "And you're absolutely certain this will work legally?" I asked, looking at the complex LLC formation documents Warren had prepared. "The corporate structure is completely solid," Warren assured me, pointing out key provisions. "Diane won't know you're involved until you choose to reveal yourself as the principal." I signed where indicated on multiple forms, then handed over the cashier's check I'd brought. My emergency fund was about to become my insurance policy against Diane's takeover. "One more thing," Frank said as I gathered my coat to leave. "Once we make the offer, things will move quickly. Are you emotionally ready for what comes next with your family?" I thought about my cake shop, about Trevor's conflict avoidance, about years of Diane's subtle undermining and not so subtle disapproval. "I've spent 5 years being the perfect daughter-in-law, trying to earn approval that was never going to come," I said with newfound clarity. "I'm ready to be something else entirely, a businesswoman protecting what's hers." Walking to my car, I received another text from Trevor. "Mom's already discussing rebranding ideas for the shop. Please try to be supportive on Sunday. This means a lot to her." I typed back a simple "looking forward to hearing her vision" and smiled to myself. Sunday dinner was going to be enlightening for everyone involved. 2 days later, "The offer's been accepted without negotiation," Frank announced over speakerphone, his voice echoing slightly. I gripped my cell phone tighter, having ducked into the cake shop's walk-in refrigerator for privacy among the chilling buttercream and ganache. Diane didn't even counteroffer? She must be truly desperate to sell quickly. "How long until we close on the property?" 2 weeks maximum. Warren's expediting everything through his contacts. I ended the call as Julia knocked gently on the refrigerator door. "Boss, there's a corporate representative here again. Says he needs to discuss the rebranding strategy with you immediately." I stepped out to find a polished young man in an expensive suit waiting, tablet in hand. Diane's corporate soldier, sent to systematically dismantle everything that made my cake shop special and beloved. "Mrs. Stevens asked me to review these proposed changes with you," he said, pulling up a sleek presentation. "We're thinking Stevens' signature desserts for the new name." I bit my tongue until I tasted blood, nodding mechanically as he detailed their plans to replace my hand-lettered chalkboard menus with digital displays, and my carefully selected vintage furniture with contemporary chrome and glass. And naturally, he continued with corporate enthusiasm, "We'll need to standardize all recipes. No more daily specials or custom designs. Everything needs to be consistent and reproducible for potential franchising opportunities." My phone buzzed discreetly, a text from Allison, "Property purchase documents ready. Need your signature ASAP." "I have an urgent appointment," I said, standing abruptly and gathering my things. "We'll have to continue this presentation another time. But Mrs. Stevens specifically requested these changes be implemented by next week." I said later. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, pausing only to whisper to Julia, "Don't let him change a single thing while I'm gone. Not even a fork." At Warren's office, I found both brothers waiting with a substantial stack of documents. "Once you sign these final papers," Warren explained, pointing to the signature lines. The house will legally belong to your LLC. Diane won't know until the closing documents are filed publicly. And that's completely legal? I confirmed, pen poised. Absolutely. Buyers have no obligation to reveal their identity until closing. By then, it will be too late for her to back out of the sale. I signed everywhere they indicated, my hand remarkably steady despite my racing heart. There's something else you should know, Frank said, looking slightly uncomfortable. Diane called this morning. She wants to accelerate the closing timeline. Claims she has another investment property she's interested in purchasing immediately. My cake shop's money, I realized aloud, the pieces clicking into place. She's planning to use my business's capital to fund another purchase before anyone realizes she's in financial trouble. Back at the shop, I found Trevor waiting, his face tight with tension, pacing in my small office. Mom's wondering why you missed the meeting with the corporate development team, he said, following me as I hung up my coat. She says you're being unnecessarily difficult about the transition. Difficult? I laughed harshly, the sound strange even to my own ears. Like how she's being difficult about completely dismantling everything I've spent years building? Did you see their plans to standardize everything? She's trying to help grow the business, Meredith. This is what she does professionally. Stop saying that. I slammed my hand on the desk, making the framed photo of us on opening day jump. When are you going to see what she's really doing? This isn't about helping me, it's about helping herself. And what exactly is she doing, Meredith? His voice rose to match mine, frustration evident. Because from where I'm standing, you're the one acting strange lately. Secret phone calls, mysterious appointments, disappearing in the middle of busy days. You want to talk about strange behavior? I pulled out the corporate redesign plans and spread them across the desk. Your mother wants to erase every trace of my creativity from this place. 5 years of my life, my vision, my connection with this community, gone because she says so, and you're standing by letting her do it. Trevor's face softened, shifting to that placating expression I'd grown to resent. It's just business evolution, honey. Change isn't always a bad thing. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with an urgent email from Frank, critical. Diane's agent requesting closing date moved up to next week. I have to go, I said, grabbing my keys from the desk drawer. Trevor's expression hardened, that familiar stubborn set to his jaw. What's going on, Meredith? What aren't you telling me? Nothing you need to worry about. I paused at the door, unable to resist adding, just like I apparently don't need to worry about my cake shop anymore. I spent the rest of the afternoon with Warren and Frank, rushing through closing paperwork and arranging financing details. By evening, everything was set for property transfer in just 5 days. Returning to the cake shop after hours, I found Julia still there, methodically removing the corporate representative's sample displays and promotional materials. He tried to change everything while you were gone, she said, tossing a glossy brochure into the recycling bin. I told him all changes needed your express approval first, as stated in the original contract. Thank you. I helped her take down the mock-up of a digital menu board. Things are going to get complicated around here very soon. You might want to start looking for another position, just to be safe. No way, she crossed her arms decisively, her young face determined. I'm staying right here. Someone needs to help you fight the corporate takeover. Besides, no one else makes buttercream like you taught me. My phone lit up with a text from Trevor. Mom wants us over for dinner tomorrow night. Says we need to discuss your resistance to progress regarding the business changes. Speaking of corporate takeovers, I showed Julia the message. Looks like tomorrow's the warm-up for Sunday's main confrontation. Think I should be nervous? I thought about the house closing documents hidden in my tote bag, about Diane's smug certainty that her plan was succeeding, about Trevor's lifelong pattern of deferring to his mother's wishes. No, I replied, surprising myself with how calm I felt. I'm actually ready for this showdown. Julia squeezed my arm supportively. Show them what a real businesswoman looks like, boss. I smiled, thinking of the storm about to break over the Stevens family. Oh, I plan to. I really plan to. The next day, congratulations, Warren said, sliding the final property paperwork across his desk. You're officially a homeowner again, this time of a rather impressive estate. I stared at the documents, my hands trembling slightly as I traced Diane's elegant signature. She'd signed them this very morning, still completely unaware of who had really purchased her beloved mansion. When exactly will she discover the truth? The deed records tomorrow, he leaned back in his chair, looking satisfied. By law, she has 3 days to vacate the premises once she receives the official notice. My phone buzzed again, Trevor calling for the 4th time today. I sent it to voicemail with a swipe. He's been trying to reach me since last night's dinner, I explained to Warren. It didn't go well, to put it mildly. The previous evening had been a master class in passive-aggressive warfare. Diane had spent the entire meal outlining her plans for my shop while I sat there, smiling and nodding, knowing her carefully constructed world was about to implode. We'll implement the new business plan starting Monday, she'd announced over coffee and dessert, not even asking my opinion. We'll need to close for 2 full weeks for renovations and staff retraining. 2 weeks? I'd asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral while mentally calculating the lost revenue. What about our standing orders and the children's birthday parties already scheduled? Oh, dear, she'd patted my hand condescendingly, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. Those small neighborhood customers won't matter once we're properly positioned in the upscale market. We'll attract a completely different clientele. Those small neighborhood customers paid for everything in that shop. I'd snapped, finally losing my composure. Every mixer, every oven, every recipe development session, they're the heart of this business. Meredith, Trevor had cut in sharply, that warning tone I'd grown to resent. Mom knows what she's doing with business scaling. The rest of the evening had devolved from there. Now, sitting in Warren's office, I checked my phone messages. 4 from Trevor, 1 from Kyle that caught my attention. What exactly happened at dinner? Mom's been locked in her home office all morning making frantic calls to her financial advisor. Never seen her like this. Looks like she's starting to feel the pressure of her financial situation, Warren observed, collecting the signed documents. Are you absolutely certain you want to wait until Sunday's dinner to reveal everything? We could send the notification sooner. Sunday dinner is her domain, I said with quiet determination, her weekly power play where everyone follows her script. It's poetically appropriate that's where this all ends. Back at the cake shop, I found Trevor waiting in my small office, pacing between the filing cabinet and desk. Where have you been all afternoon? He demanded, his tie loosened and hair disheveled. Mom's been trying to reach you about finalizing the renovation schedule. I had important appointments. More of those secret meetings you're so concerned about, I replied calmly. He ran his hands through his hair in frustration, a gesture that once endeared him to me. What's happening to you, Mayor? Ever since you signed over the shop, you've been different. You mean ever since you and your mother pressured me into signing over my life's work and passion? I corrected him, organizing receipts with deliberate precision. That's not a fair characterization. Mom is investing substantial capital in this venture. Is she really? I interrupted, thinking of her desperate rush to close the house sale. Are you absolutely certain about her current financial position? He faltered slightly, uncertainty flickering across his face. What are you implying? Before I could respond, Julia knocked on the doorframe. Sorry to interrupt, but Mrs. Stevens is here again. She seems agitated. Diane swept in, looking noticeably less polished than usual. Her designer blouse had a coffee stain near the collar, and her normally perfect hair showed signs of repeated nervous styling. Meredith, dear, we need to accelerate the renovation timeline. The contractors can start tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? Trevor looked confused, turning to his mother. Mom, you explicitly said Monday was the start date. Plans change in business, she snapped, then quickly composed her features. It's better for everyone to move quickly. Everyone meaning you and your timeline? I asked with deliberate sweetness. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. I don't appreciate your tone, Meredith, and I don't like what you're doing to my investment, but here we are. It's not your shop anymore, she reminded me, voice sharp as a pastry knife. You signed over controlling interest, remember? Oh, I remember every detail, I smiled, thinking of the house deed sitting in my bag. Speaking of important signatures, how's your house sale progressing? I hear the closing's been moved up. She paled visibly, perfectly manicured hand tightening on her purse strap. That's absolutely none of your concern. Mom, Trevor looked between us, confusion evident. What house sale? Are you selling the Oak Ridge property? Nothing important, darling, she grabbed her purse tighter, knuckles whitening. Just some routine real estate matters. Now, about tomorrow's renovation start. No, I said firmly, crossing my arms. Excuse me? Her voice went dangerously quiet. No renovations tomorrow. No renovations next week. Nothing changes until after Sunday's family dinner. You don't have the authority to delay this process, Sunday, I repeated calmly. Consider it my final request as the former proprietor. Surely you can grant me that small courtesy. She stared at me for a long moment, calculation visible behind her eyes despite her flustered appearance. Finally, she nodded stiffly. Fine. Sunday it is. But after that, things will change around here immediately. She turned to leave, her heels clicking sharply on the tile floor, then paused with a deliberate afterthought. Oh, and dear, do try to bring something other than those quaint little vanilla cupcakes this time. We're attempting to elevate the brand's image, after all. After she left, Trevor turned to me, confusion written across his face. What was that cryptic comment about the house? Is Mom really selling the Oak Ridge property? You should ask your mother directly, I suggested, arranging a display of fresh pastries. Though I sincerely doubt she'll tell you the complete truth about her financial situation. Meredith, please, can we just talk about this? Trevor, I have work to do, I cut him off, gesturing to the kitchen. Apparently, I only have a few days left to make my quaint little cupcakes before they're replaced with your mother's standardized corporate offerings. That evening, as I was closing up the shop, my phone lit up with a text from Frank, deed officially recorded. Legal notice will be delivered tomorrow morning. I looked around my cake shop, my beautiful, warm, successful business that Diane was so desperate to transform into another soulless chain, and felt a fierce satisfaction rising in my chest. Game on, Diane, I whispered to the empty room, the scent of vanilla and butter still lingering in the air. Game on. The next morning, the shop's bell chimed urgently as Kyle burst through the door, his photographer's bag still slung over his shoulder, face flushed with excitement or alarm, I couldn't immediately tell which. Have you seen Mom today? He asked without preamble. I looked up from the intricate fondant flowers I was arranging on a wedding cake display. No. Should I have? She's completely losing it. Like, full-on meltdown mode, He slumped onto a stool at the counter, running his hands through his hair. Some official-looking courier delivered legal papers this morning, and she's been locked in her home office making frantic calls ever since. How concerning, I said carefully, adding another delicate sugar rose to my creation. Any idea what those papers might contain? No specifics, but she keeps shouting about lawyers and impossible deadlines. He grabbed a blueberry muffin from the display case, stress eating like he used to do in college. Dad says she's been trying to reach every financial advisor and real estate attorney in her contact list. Julia caught my eye from across the room, trying to suppress a knowing smile. She was the only employee I'd trusted with the complete story. I'm sure she'll manage to sort it out, I said, adding the final golden touches to the cake. Your mother always lands on her feet, doesn't she? Yeah, but, Kyle lowered his voice, leaning closer over the counter, I think it's definitely about the house sale, and I overheard her mention the cake shop too. Something about needing to accelerate the acquisition timeline immediately. My phone buzzed discreetly, a text from Warren, Diane's attorney called. They're attempting to delay the eviction notice. Too late for that, I typed back quickly. The strangest part, Kyle continued, oblivious to my brief distraction, is that she keeps insisting she needs to speak with you before Sunday's dinner. Something urgent about moving up the renovation schedule. Does she indeed? I wiped my hands methodically on my apron. Well, she certainly knows where to find me. Right on cue, the bell above the door chimed again. Diane strode in, looking remarkably different from her usual polished self. Her expertly highlighted hair was visibly disheveled, her designer blouse had an unmistakable coffee stain near the collar, and her makeup couldn't quite conceal her stress. Kyle, she snapped upon seeing her younger son, what are you doing here? Just grabbing breakfast, Mom, he held up his half-eaten muffin defensively. Everything okay? You seem a little intense today. Everything's perfectly fine. I need to speak with Meredith alone. Immediately. Kyle glanced between us, curiosity evident, then wisely retreated to a corner table with Julia. We need to move up the renovations, Diane said without preamble or greeting, starting tomorrow morning. We've already discussed this extensively, I replied calmly, continuing to arrange display items as if this were any normal business day. Nothing changes until after Sunday's dinner. This isn't a request, Meredith. The contractors are already scheduled and materials ordered. Then you'll need to reschedule them, I responded evenly. Her perfectly manicured hands gripped the counter edge so tightly her knuckles whitened. Listen to me very carefully. I control this business now. You will follow my directives or what exactly? I met her gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. You'll terminate my position? Go right ahead. But good luck running this place without my recipes, my supplier relationships, and my loyal customer base who come specifically for my creations. Mom, Kyle called from his table, surprising me with his intervention, maybe this isn't the right approach. She whirled toward him, then visibly forced herself to regain composure before turning back to me. I've been extraordinarily patient with you, Meredith, but my patience has definite limits. Funny coincidence, I said, maintaining my calm exterior. I was just thinking the exact same thing about my own patience. Her phone rang shrilly, probably another attorney calling with bad news, and she grabbed it with barely concealed panic. This conversation isn't over, she hissed before hurrying outside to take the call. Kyle approached the counter once she'd left, genuine concern in his eyes. I've never seen her like this, not even during the divorce or when I dropped out of business school. People often reveal their true nature when they're desperate, I said, methodically cleaning my workspace. Desperate, he frowned, genuine confusion on his face. Mom's never desperate. She's always the one in control of every situation. Is she really? I raised an eyebrow meaningfully. Maybe you should ask her specific questions about the house sale and her current financial position. Later that evening, Trevor came by as I was closing the shop. He looked troubled, dark circles under his eyes. Kyle mentioned you and Mom had another confrontation today. Not a confrontation, I corrected him, carefully counting the day's receipts. Just a fundamental disagreement about appropriate timing. He also mentioned something about the house being sold. He leaned against the counter, trying to appear casual but failing. What's really going on, Mayor? Mom's acting completely out of character. You're being uncharacteristically secretive. Have you ever considered, I asked, deliberately closing the register drawer with a final sounding click, why your mother suddenly needed control of my cake shop so desperately? She wants to help grow the family business portfolio. No, I cut him off firmly, she needs it. There's a crucial difference there. What are you talking about? His confusion seemed genuine. Ask her directly about the house sale, Trevor. Ask her why she's so desperate to start renovations here before Sunday's dinner. His phone buzzed predictably, Diane, of course. He answered immediately, the old pattern reasserting itself. Yes, Mom, no, I'm with Meredith right now, what? But you said, okay, I'll be right there. Let me guess, I said as he ended the call, another emergency family meeting? She says it's critically important. He hesitated, hand extended toward me. Come with me? Please? No thank you, I grabbed my purse, ready to leave. I'm saving all my family interaction energy for Sunday's dinner. Meredith, please, something's clearly wrong. You should go, I said, gesturing to his still buzzing phone. Your mother's waiting, as always. After he left, I checked my own messages. One from Warren, everything legally set for Sunday. No possible way she can prevent what's coming. Another from Allison, are you absolutely certain you want to proceed this way? It's not too late to consider a different approach. I thought about Diane's increasingly desperate behavior today, about Trevor's lifetime of divided loyalties, about years of subtle undermining and increasingly overt control attempts. I'm absolutely certain, I replied to both messages. Sunday dinner is happening exactly as planned. I looked around my beloved cake shop one last time before leaving for the night. By this time next week, everything would be dramatically different. I just hoped I was emotionally prepared for the family fallout. Saturday morning, Mrs. Stevens requests an immediate private meeting, the corporate attorney announced, striding into my shop Saturday morning with an air of practiced authority. She's prepared to offer you a quite generous severance package. I continued carefully boxing up cupcakes for a child's birthday party, my focus on the delicate frosting. Is she indeed? She's willing to buy out your remaining ownership percentage, he continued, placing an official-looking document folder on the counter, at full market value, plus 3 months additional salary compensation. Tell me something interesting, I said, tying a perfect satin bow around the box. Does Diane yet fully understand the implications of the property eviction notice she received? The lawyer's practiced professional expression slipped for just a moment, genuine surprise crossing his face. I'm not at liberty to discuss other client matters. No, I smiled knowingly, then I'm certainly not at liberty to discuss this business proposal either. I'll see you at dinner tomorrow. He left the folder anyway, but I didn't bother opening it. Instead, I texted Warren, Diane's trying to buy my silence before tomorrow's revelation. Clever last-minute strategy. Unfortunately for her, it's far too late for damage control, he replied. The bell chimed again. This time, it was Kyle, looking significantly more agitated than yesterday, his creative dishevelment replaced by genuine stress. "Mom's selling the house," he blurted out the moment the door closed behind him. "She just informed the family. Claims it's a strategic portfolio adjustment or some corporate doublespeak." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow, carefully starting another batch of birthday cupcakes. "Did anyone happen to mention who purchased it?" "Some investment company called Summit Valley LLC, but that's not even the weird part." He leaned in close, voice dropping to a near whisper. "She's making a huge deal about everyone attending dinner tomorrow. Mandatory family attendance. Dad, me, Trevor, everyone absolutely must be there for the weekly tradition, no exceptions." I concentrated on measuring ingredients, feeling his eyes on me. "Meredith," he grabbed my arm gently but firmly. "What's really happening here? First the cake shop, now the house sale. Something's seriously wrong with this picture." Before I could decide how to answer, Trevor walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "We need to talk," he said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "I'll just." Kyle backed away awkwardly. "Yeah, see you both tomorrow at the family showdown." After he left, Trevor slumped onto a stool, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "Why didn't you tell me about Mom's buyout offer?" "You mean the one her attorney delivered approximately 20 minutes ago?" I kept my voice even. "She's attempting to retroactively make things right, Trevor." I set down my piping bag with more force than necessary. "Make it right?" She pressured me into signing over my business, is systematically planning to destroy everything I've spent years building, and now thinks she can buy my silence with 3 months' salary? That's not making it right, that's damage control. "Silence about what exactly?" He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "Everyone's acting completely irrational. Mom's having secret financial meetings, you're being cryptic about this house sale. Have you directly asked her about that?" I interrupted, meeting his eyes. "About why she's really selling the family estate so suddenly." "She says it's just a standard business decision." "And you believe that explanation? Just like you believed her about needing to take over my cake shop for purely beneficial reasons?" His phone buzzed yet again, Diane, predictably. This time, however, he glanced at it and silenced the call. "What am I supposed to believe, Meredith? My wife is keeping significant secrets, my mother is unraveling." "Your mother," I said firmly, "is finally facing the consequences of her own actions. And tomorrow, at dinner, everyone present is going to see exactly who she really is beneath the designer clothes and executive title." "What does that cryptic statement mean?" Another discreet buzz, this time my phone. Frank had sent a photo of the final eviction notice, ready for delivery tomorrow. "You should probably go," I said, turning back to my baking. "Your mother undoubtedly needs your support right now. Meredith, please, just tell me what's happening." "Tomorrow, Trevor. All your questions will be answered tomorrow, at dinner. I promise you that much." After Trevor left, Julia emerged from the back room, wiping flour from her hands. That conversation was intense. I could feel the tension from the kitchen. "Just wait until tomorrow's dinner." I checked my phone again, finding a message from Allison asking if I needed moral support for the confrontation. "Yes," I typed back, "but not at the actual dinner. Meet me after?" After the rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of baking and preparations for weekend orders, I stayed long after closing, meticulously ensuring everything was perfectly organized for Sunday's special cake orders. As I was locking up, Kyle texted again. "Mom's literally called every real estate attorney and financial advisor in town." "What exactly is happening?" "Nothing she hasn't brought upon herself," I replied, feeling a strange calm settle over me. That night, I lay awake in the guest bedroom, having told Trevor I needed space to think. Through the wall, I could hear him tossing and turning. My phone lit up with a final message from Warren, everything legally prepared for tomorrow. Final opportunity to reconsider this approach. I thought about the first time I'd met Diane, how she'd surveyed my modest cake shop with barely disguised condescension, how she'd spent years subtly undermining my business decisions, using Trevor as her unwitting messenger, how she'd finally revealed her true intentions when financial pressure gave her the opportunity to seize what I'd built with my own hands. No reconsideration necessary, I replied firmly. Proceeding as planned. Sunday morning dawned with perfect blue skies. I rose early, baking one final batch of my quaint little vanilla cupcakes, the ones Diane had repeatedly dismissed as too simple. Trevor watched me from the kitchen doorway, his expression uncertain. "Mom texted that we need to be there by 5 sharp, he said quietly. I'm well aware. I placed the cupcakes carefully in a signature box from my shop. Wouldn't want to be late for what will certainly be a memorable Stevens family dinner. What exactly does that cryptic comment mean? His voice held genuine concern. I closed the box, tied it with a perfect satin ribbon, and collected my purse, ensuring the house documents were securely inside. It means, I said, heading for the door with measured steps, that after tonight, your family dynamic will never be quite the same again. The look of confusion and growing alarm on his face almost made me reconsider my approach. Almost. At the Stevens dinner, Diane's formal dining room was suffocating with unspoken tension. Kyle kept checking his phone under the table, Trevor wouldn't meet anyone's eyes, and Diane's hands trembled slightly as she served the expensive roast she'd prepared. Impressive dinner as always, Kyle said, attempting to break the oppressive silence, though I'm surprised you cooked with everything that's happening with the house sale. Everything's perfectly under control, she snapped, then forced her features into a practiced smile. Meredith, dear, I assume you've had adequate time to review the generous offer my attorney delivered yesterday? Oh yes, I took a deliberate bite of potato. Quite generous indeed. Almost as generous as the offer you accepted on your house. Her fork clattered loudly against the fine china. Trevor's father looked up, genuinely confused. The house sale? I thought that transaction wasn't being publicly discussed yet. It isn't, Diane said quickly, her voice tightly controlled, just a private business matter. Nothing that concerns everyone at this table. I pulled out my phone, casually checking the time. Interesting, because I heard the new owners are taking possession extraordinarily soon. The doorbell rang, making Diane visibly flinch. She glanced at the ornate wall clock. 6 o'clock exactly. I'll answer it, she said, standing abruptly. No need, I smiled calmly. They're here at my request. The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. Kyle went to answer it, returning moments later with a courier holding official-looking documents. Special delivery for Mrs. Stevens, he announced to the silent room. Which Mrs. Stevens? I asked with deliberate sweetness. Diane snatched the envelope, her perfectly manicured hands shaking as she tore it open. Her face drained of color as she read. This cannot be correct. What is it, Mom? Trevor asked, half rising from his chair. It's. She looked at me, horrified realization dawning in her eyes. You're the property buyer. Buyer? Kyle grabbed the papers from his mother's limp hands. Holy shit. Meredith bought the house? That's absolutely insane. Diane sputtered incoherently, but the purchase was made by Summit Valley LLC. My LLC, I confirmed calmly, taking another bite of my dinner, established specifically for this purpose. The deed was officially recorded Friday afternoon. Trevor stood up so forcefully his chair crashed to the floor behind him. What in God's name is happening here? Your wife, Diane spat venomously, has just revealed herself as the anonymous buyer of our family home. This is underhanded manipulation. I couldn't help laughing aloud at the sheer irony. Manipulation? That's remarkably rich, coming from you of all people. Why don't you tell everyone at this table, Diane? Tell them why you really needed control of my cake shop. I don't have any idea what you're implying, she said, voice quivering despite her attempt at confidence. The refinancing for your properties fell through, didn't it? I continued calmly. The market crashed, your development projects lost nearly half their value, and suddenly you needed a new steady revenue source and collateral. Enter my profitable, debt-free cake shop. Mom, Kyle was reading through the official papers, genuine shock on his face. This is a formal eviction notice. You have 3 days to vacate the premises. It's completely unenforceable. Diane declared desperately. I'll contest this immediately. With what financial resources? I stood up, pulling additional documents from my purse. Your business accounts are overdrawn, your credit lines are maxed out, and now you've lost both the house and your opportunity to appropriate my shop's profits to save your failing empire. Trevor grabbed the papers, scanning them with growing horror. These financial statements. Mom, is this actually true? Are you insolvent? Of course it's all fabrication. She's deliberately trying to destroy our family. No, I cut in firmly, I'm preventing you from destroying anything else of mine. The cake shop transfer agreement is now void, having been signed under duress and with fraudulent intentions. My attorney filed the nullification paperwork yesterday. You can't possibly prove any of this, actually, I can prove everything. Kyle inadvertently told me about your refinancing difficulties weeks ago. That's what triggered this entire situation, isn't it? You desperately needed my shop's assets and cash flow to secure another loan. The room fell completely silent. Trevor looked between his mother and me, his entire worldview visibly crumbling before my eyes. 3 days, I said, standing up with dignity. That's how long you legally have to vacate the property. Don't concern yourself with the cake shop renovations, I'll personally contact the contractors you scheduled. You vindictive little gold digger, careful with your choice of words, I warned calmly. The new owner of this house might decide to exercise her legal right to shorten that timeline considerably. Kyle let out a low, impressed whistle. Damn, Meredith. Mental note, never get on your bad side. Meredith. Trevor finally spoke, his voice hollow with shock. Why didn't you tell me any of this was happening? Would you honestly have believed my version of events? I asked simply. Over hers? After a lifetime of deferring to her judgment? He had no answer, his silence more revealing than any words. This situation isn't concluded, Diane threatened, though her voice betrayed her desperation. Actually, it absolutely is. I collected my purse calmly. Oh, and those quaint little cupcakes you've been disparaging for years? They were featured in Regional Pastry Monthly last spring. Just thought you should know before you attempt to elevate the recipe. I walked toward the exit with measured steps, pausing in the doorway for one final comment. Kyle, Trevor, you might want to help your mother pack her essential belongings. 3 days isn't much time to vacate a house this size. You can't simply walk away from this. Diane called after me, panic evident in her voice. Trevor, stop her. Tell her she can't. Tell her what exactly, Mom? Trevor's voice sounded weary and defeated. That you lied to all of us? That you tried to seize her business to cover your financial mismanagement? I left them there, stepping out into the cool evening air, taking my first deep breath in weeks. My phone buzzed, Allison checking in. "It's done," I typed. "Meet me at the cake shop. I could use a friend and some fresh pastries." As I drove away, I caught a final glimpse of the mansion in my rearview mirror. Diane's perfect showcase home, now legally mine. The ultimate consequence for years of manipulation and control. Tomorrow would bring its own complex challenges: my marriage, the shop's future, the family fallout. But for tonight, I had reclaimed what was mine, and that was enough. 3 days later, "She's actually gone," Kyle said in disbelief, watching the moving truck pull away from his childhood home. "I still can't believe you managed to pull this off. It's like something from a movie." I handed him a coffee from my shop, the familiar logo on the cup a comforting sight. I have moments of disbelief myself. We sat on the grand front steps, the morning sun warming the brick beneath us. The past 3 days had been absolute chaos: Diane's rage and denial, Trevor's painful silence, endless lawyer calls and negotiations, but now, finally, it was done. "Trevor's been looking for you," Kyle mentioned, sipping his coffee thoughtfully. "He's been coming to the cake shop every morning this week." "I know. Julia's been respectfully turning him away until I'm ready. He seems different now, since Sunday night. It's like he's finally waking up from some kind of lifelong trance." My phone buzzed softly, Allison sending me potential property listings. I decided to sell the mansion eventually, but not before using it for something meaningful first. "Did you see the flyer I had designed?" I asked Kyle. He pulled it from his jacket pocket, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "Free baking classes for underprivileged kids in Mom's pristine gourmet kitchen." That's absolutely brilliant poetic justice. "The first class begins next Tuesday afternoon. Your mother's precious imported marble countertops are about to meet 20 enthusiastic 8-year-olds learning to make their very first pizzas." Speaking of the cake shop, Kyle hesitated, fidgeting with his coffee cup. "Mom's been telling everyone who'll listen that you manipulated her out of a legitimate business expansion opportunity." "Let her talk all she wants," I replied with newfound confidence. The truth has a remarkable way of revealing itself eventually. Right on cue, my phone lit up with a breaking news alert: local entrepreneur exposes high-profile real estate fraud scheme. Warren's media contacts had delivered as promised. Well, Kyle stood up, brushing off his designer jeans. "I should probably get going. Mom's expecting me to help her organize her new apartment." The movers weren't exactly careful with her precious antiques. How's she handling the dramatic downsize from mansion to apartment living? Let's just say her new neighbors in the senior living complex aren't particularly impressed by her endless stories about her former estate or her designer furniture that doesn't fit the floor plan. After he left, I walked through the grand house one final time. The elegant rooms still echoed with Sunday's confrontation, with Trevor's final words to his mother that kept replaying in my mind: "How could you do this to her? To us? All these years?" The front door opened behind me. I knew exactly who it was without turning around. "You haven't been home in 3 days," Trevor said quietly from the entryway. I needed space to think clearly. And now I had. I turned to face him. He looked noticeably different, more mature somehow, but also unburdened, as though he'd finally set down a weight he'd been carrying his entire life. "Now I need to know something important," I said, meeting his eyes directly. "If she hadn't been exposed, if she'd succeeded in taking over my shop, would you have ever truly stood up to her?" "I honestly don't know," he admitted, the painful truth visible in his expression. "That's what terrifies me the most about all this. I've spent my entire adult life making excuses for her behavior, believing her version of events without question, and now I want to make things right with you, with the cake shop, with everything we planned together." He stepped closer, careful to maintain a respectful distance. But first, I need to know something too. Did you orchestrate all this purely for revenge? No, I walked to the bay window, looking out at the immaculate garden where Diane had hosted countless picture-perfect family gatherings. I did it because someone finally had to stop her pattern of control, because sometimes the only effective way to deal with a lifelong bully is to remove their leverage and power. The children's baking classes, he said with a hint of admiration, that was a particularly inspired touch. The house will be sold eventually, but first it's going to genuinely help people who need it, real families from the community, not just Diane's social networking contacts. And what about us? His voice cracked slightly, revealing raw emotion. Is there still an us to salvage after all this? I turned back to face him directly. That entirely depends. Who is Trevor Stevens without his mother's influence shaping his decisions? Because that's the man I need time to get to know. I'd sincerely like to discover that myself. He pulled something from his pocket, a familiar key with my shop's logo. I had the locks at Sweet Dreams changed back yesterday. The business is yours again, legally and completely. Mom signed the ownership reversal papers this morning at her attorney's office. The weight of the key felt perfectly right in my palm, like coming home after a long journey. I'm not moving back into our house yet, I told him honestly. I need more time and space. Time. We definitely need time. I understand completely. His eyes held hope rather than resentment. But perhaps, maybe we could start with something simple like coffee at the shop? My phone buzzed again, Julia sending a photo of the grand reopening, under original ownership banner she'd proudly hung in the front window. Coffee sounds like a reasonable first step, I said, but there's something important I need to do first. I pulled out my own set of keys and held them out to Trevor. The house is yours, if you want to accept it. Not for us to live in, but for you to help coordinate the community programs we've planned. Something genuinely positive should emerge from this situation. He stared at the keys, then back at me with astonishment. You're simply giving it up, just like that? I never actually wanted this house. I only needed to demonstrate that she couldn't take what rightfully belonged to me. My smile felt genuine for the first time in weeks. Besides, I already have a true home. It features professional ovens instead of imported marble countertops, and it smells like fresh vanilla and chocolate instead of expensive designer perfume. Trevor pocketed the keys, new understanding dawning in his eyes. Coffee tomorrow, then? Would around 9:30 work? Better make it 10:30, I said. The morning rush keeps me particularly busy with regulars. You remember all those small neighborhood customers your mother was so dismissive of. He laughed, a genuine, unguarded laugh I hadn't heard in years. 10:30 it is, then. I took one final look around Diane's perfect showcase house, then walked out without a backward glance. Tomorrow would bring fresh pastries, hot coffee, and perhaps, just perhaps, an opportunity to build something authentic from the remains of what had crumbled. But first, I had some signature cupcakes to bake. Don't you want to try the special coffee I made just for you, darling? My husband, Griffin, asked with that peculiar smile that never quite reached his eyes. The one that made my skin crawl. The chandelier light reflected off the polished mahogany of Margot's ornate dining table, casting dramatic shadows across her meticulously decorated Nashville home. We were gathered for what she called a celebration dinner before tomorrow's Advertising Industry Awards, where I was nominated for Creative Director of the Year. The coffee cup before me emitted a strange, almost metallic odor that made my stomach clench painfully. My name is Lena, and at 29, I never imagined I'd be sitting here, seriously wondering if my own husband was attempting to poison me. But after 3 years of marriage and a disturbing pattern of accidental food poisonings, I'd developed a heightened sense of caution, particularly around Margot. My sister-in-law had perfected the art of orchestrating situations that left me either physically ill or publicly humiliated, always maintaining that same artificial smile Griffin was wearing now. "How incredibly thoughtful of you," I replied, forcing warmth into my voice while my mind catalogued every warning signal flaring through my body. The scent rising from the cup was unlike any coffee I'd ever encountered. It triggered a vivid flashback to just last month when I'd ended up in urgent care after drinking tea at Margot's house, conveniently the night before I was scheduled to present to a major client. The doctors had been baffled by my symptoms, and Margot had insisted with practiced concern that she'd prepared the tea exactly the same way she'd made her own. I glanced across the table where Margot was watching me with predatory intensity, absently stirring her untouched coffee while wearing that $5,000 designer dress that screamed success despite the rumors of her department's financial troubles. "Griffin has become quite the coffee enthusiast lately," she remarked with a smirk tugging at her perfectly lined lips. "He's been experimenting with all sorts of special brewing methods just for you." The deliberate emphasis she placed on "for you" sent ice water cascading down my spine. Recently, Griffin had been spending an unusual amount of time at Margot's house, claiming they were planning some elaborate surprise for our upcoming anniversary. But things hadn't added up: hushed conversations that abruptly ceased when I entered rooms, cryptic text messages I'd glimpsed on his phone, and now this coffee with its unsettling chemical undertone. I lifted the cup deliberately, pretending to savor the aroma while studying their expressions. Griffin's eyes darted toward Margot, a flash of complicity passing between them that confirmed every suspicion I'd been documenting for months. I knew then that the small voice recorder hidden in my jacket pocket was about to capture something significant. "Oh, look at the time," I exclaimed, making a show of checking my phone. "I need to make a quick call to the office about tomorrow's presentation." "Margot, would you mind if I use your study?" I promised to be quick. "Fine, use the study," Margot replied, her perfect hostess mask slipping just enough to reveal her irritation. "Try not to mess with anything on my desk. I have confidential client files there." As I stood and walked past Margot's place setting, I executed the move I'd rehearsed mentally dozens of times, deliberately stumbling and quickly switching our coffee cups in the momentary confusion as I steadied myself against the table. "I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, straightening up and smoothing my dress. "These new heels are still breaking in. I'm such a klutz sometimes." Margot's tight smile didn't reach her eyes as she brushed imaginary crumbs from her immaculate tablecloth. "Just try not to break anything in the study. That antique desk was my grandmother's." I nodded apologetically and hurried away, my pulse hammering against my ribs. Through the study's doorway, I maintained a clear line of sight to the dining table. The recorder continued capturing every sound as I waited, watching with a mixture of dread and determination. My stomach twisted violently as Margot lifted the coffee cup to her perfectly painted lips. Part of me, the part that had grown up with a fierce sense of right and wrong, wanted to rush forward and stop her, to issue a warning. But a stronger part needed irrefutable proof of what they'd been doing to me. I'd endured too many sleepless nights in emergency rooms, too many hours doubled over in excruciating pain, always following meals or drinks shared with them. My mind flashed back to when I first met Griffin at a colleague's wedding in Nashville 3 years ago. He'd been charming, attentive, seemingly supportive of my career ambitions despite coming from a privileged background himself. And Margot had initially played the welcoming sister-in-law, inviting me to family gatherings, offering fashion advice, and helping plan our wedding with apparent enthusiasm. Looking back now, I should have recognized the warning signs sooner, the way Margot would accidentally spill red wine on my white dress before important client meetings, or how food would contain excessive spice or salt whenever she helped prepare it. The incidents began subtly: minor stomach discomfort here, a slight allergic reaction there. Griffin always had a dismissive explanation ready: you probably ate something disagreeable earlier, or you're just overworked and run down. But the pattern had become impossible to ignore. The worst incident occurred 2 months ago when I ended up hospitalized after breakfast at their house, the morning before my presentation to Blackwell Industries, the major client Margot had been pursuing unsuccessfully for months. The doctors detected unusual substances in my blood work, but Griffin somehow convinced everyone I must have taken expired medication. The childhood memory of watching my neighbor's cat die after ingesting antifreeze, that distinctive sweet smell I would never forget, had made me unusually sensitive to chemical odors. That sensitivity might now save my life. I gripped the ornate wooden door frame, watching intently as Margot took another deliberate sip of the coffee. Griffin was typing on his phone, the picture of casual unconcern. My own untouched cup sat abandoned on the table, its metallic odor still lodged in my memory, making my throat constrict involuntarily. A subtle tremor in Margot's manicured hand caught my attention. She set down the delicate porcelain cup with a clatter, her carefully maintained complexion suddenly ashen. "Griffin," she said, her voice uncharacteristically unsteady, something's wrong." Griffin looked up from his phone, his expression morphing from confusion to unmistakable horror as realization dawned. He jumped to his feet so violently that his chair crashed to the floor. "Margot, what's happening?" The panic in his voice confirmed everything. Margot's hands were trembling violently now, causing her diamond bracelet to catch the light in frantic patterns across the wall. I feel." She attempted to stand but stumbled, clutching desperately at the edge of the expensive table. "Griffin, what did you put in that coffee?" Her voice cracked with accusation and fear. I stepped out of the study, my phone now openly recording everything. Griffin was beside Margot, his face drained of color. "That wasn't supposed to be your cup," he whispered, but in the perfect acoustics of Margot's dining room, his words carried with devastating clarity. Margot's eyes widened with terrible understanding, genuine fear replacing her usual calculated expression. "Call an ambulance," she gasped, sliding helplessly to the floor. "Please, I can't." I dialed 911 immediately, my hands remarkably steady despite the adrenaline surging through my body. Margot was sprawled on her imported Italian tile floor, her expensively clothed body convulsing with increasingly violent tremors. Griffin knelt beside her, undisguised panic etched across his face as he watched their meticulously constructed plan collapse catastrophically. "Emergency services, yes, we need an ambulance immediately at 1542 Maple Grove Drive," I stated with deliberate clarity, ensuring my phone continued recording with my other hand. "My sister-in-law appears to be having a severe reaction to something in her coffee. She's conscious but experiencing intensifying tremors. This is a suspected poisoning." As I relayed these details to the dispatcher, Margot's terrified eyes locked onto mine. The customary cold calculation I'd grown to recognize had vanished, replaced by naked fear and dawning realization. "Lena," she gasped between spasms, "you switched. You knew all along." "Ma'am, the ambulance is already dispatched and will arrive within minutes," the dispatcher reassured me. "Please remain on the line and monitor her condition." Griffin was becoming increasingly frantic, his carefully maintained facade crumbling completely. "Margot, what's happening? That wasn't supposed to. I mean, it wasn't meant for." "Shut up, Griffin." Margot snapped through gritted teeth, her professional composure shattered by pain and fury. "This is all your fault. You promised it would just make her sick enough to miss the awards ceremony tomorrow. You swore the dose would only cause temporary symptoms that couldn't be traced. What did you actually put in that coffee? I felt an icy calm settle over me as their confession unfolded exactly as I'd anticipated. The recording captured every damning word. My blood ran cold as the reality crystallized with brutal clarity. The awards ceremony tomorrow night, where I was scheduled to receive recognition for my work on the Blackwell Industries campaign, the same prestigious client Margot had been desperately trying to secure for her struggling department for months. All the puzzle pieces snapped into perfect, horrifying alignment. The tea incident last month, I said, my voice remarkably controlled despite the turmoil inside me, and that breakfast 2 months ago before my Blackwell presentation. Those weren't accidents or coincidences at all, were they? You've been systematically poisoning me. Margot's perfectly made-up face contorted as another wave of pain rippled through her body. Her designer dress was now crumpled and stained with sweat. The tea. She gasped between labored breaths. That was just supposed to keep you home during the Parker media pitch, but you went anyway, stubborn as always. She clutched her stomach, doubling over on the imported tile floor. Griffin promised. He said we just needed to discredit you professionally, make clients think you were unreliable and sickly. Nothing permanent. The wail of approaching sirens grew louder outside the colonial-style windows. Griffin stood up abruptly, backing away from both of us like a cornered animal. His handsome face had transformed into something unrecognizable with panic. Margot, stop talking right now. You don't know what you're saying. It's the toxin affecting your mind. I know exactly what I'm saying. Margot hissed through clenched teeth, her carefully modulated voice now slurring slightly. We've been planning this for months, ever since Lena started outshining me with every major client. Her background story of pulling herself up from nothing with scholarships makes my MBA seem worthless. Her eyes darted accusingly to Griffin. You were supposed to make absolutely certain she drank from the right cup today. How could you mess this up? The paramedics burst through the heavy front door, equipment in hand, and I quickly stepped aside to give them space to work. As they efficiently loaded Margot onto a stretcher, her once commanding presence now diminished and vulnerable, I stopped my recording and immediately sent the video to my private email, my lawyer, and a secure cloud storage account I'd set up months ago. Griffin stood frozen in Margot's magnificent foyer, watching helplessly as his carefully constructed world disintegrated around him. I'll accompany her to the hospital, I informed the paramedics with quiet authority. As her family member, I should be there. I turned to meet Griffin's terrified gaze directly. And I'm certain the toxicology specialists will be extremely interested in identifying exactly what compound was in that special coffee blend you prepared. The emergency department at Nashville Memorial Hospital was a chaotic hive of urgent activity as medical personnel rushed to treat Margot. I sat alone in the sterile waiting room, my phone clutched in my hand, replaying segments of the damning recording. The unmistakable panic in their voices, the explicit admissions of guilt, it was all documented proof that my months of careful evidence gathering had been horrifyingly justified. Family of Margot Lawson, a nurse called out, scanning the waiting area. I rose to my feet, acutely aware of Griffin's telling absence. He'd muttered something about moving his car from the ambulance bay nearly 30 minutes ago and had conspicuously failed to return. I'm her sister-in-law, I stated, following the nurse through the secure double doors. How is her condition? She's stabilized for now, but we've detected concerning levels of unusual compounds in her blood work. The nurse's expression was gravely professional. Dr. Hastings, our toxicology specialist, would like to speak with you about some troubling findings. Dr. Hastings, a distinguished woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and penetrating eyes that missed nothing, was reviewing charts outside Margot's room. "Mrs. Lawson," she addressed me directly, "I need a complete account of what transpired before your sister-in-law's symptoms began." I took a measured breath, steadying myself as I retrieved my phone. "I believe you should hear this recording first." I played the incriminating audio captured in Margot's dining room, watching as the doctor's expression transformed from clinical detachment to profound alarm. "This constitutes a serious criminal matter," she said firmly, making detailed notes on her tablet. "The substance we've identified in Ms. Lawson's system is a pharmaceutical-grade compound not available to the general public. This is unquestionably a case of deliberate poisoning." Just then, Griffin appeared at the far end of the corridor, his face ashen and damp with perspiration. His normally impeccable appearance was disheveled, his designer clothes rumpled. He'd clearly overheard the doctor's assessment. "Lena," he called out, taking a hesitant step toward me, "please, let me explain what happened." "Stay where you are," Dr. Hastings commanded sharply, immediately pressing the emergency call button on the wall. "Security to room 215, immediately." Griffin raised his hands in a placating gesture, his charm now completely evaporated. "This is all just a terrible misunderstanding." Margot was confused and disoriented, she didn't know what she was saying. "The stress at work has been affecting her judgment." "Is that so?" I pulled up the series of text messages I'd discovered on his unlocked phone last week while he slept, messages I'd promptly forwarded to myself and my lawyer. "Then perhaps you can explain these exchanges between you and Margot discussing methods to ensure I'd be temporarily indisposed before the Blackwell Industries ceremony? Or these references to gradually increasing dosages?" The remaining color drained from Griffin's face. "You went through my private messages? That's invasion of privacy." "After I discovered unusual chemical compounds hidden in your home office drawer, I felt entirely justified," I replied evenly, turning back to Dr. Hastings. "Doctor, I've experienced 3 separate hospitalizations over the past 6 months following meals or drinks prepared by them, all with unexplained symptoms. I'd like to know if those symptoms correspond with what you found in Margot's system today." The doctor's eyes narrowed with clinical interest. "We'll need comparative tests and your previous medical records." In the meantime, she nodded toward the 2 burly security guards who had appeared flanking Griffin. "Hospital security will ensure your husband remains available for police questioning." Griffin looked utterly trapped as the guards positioned themselves on either side of him, his carefully cultivated facade of success and confidence completely shattered. "Margot and I," he stammered desperately, "we were only trying to help you slow down your punishing work schedule. You were driving yourself too hard, taking on every major client, working yourself into exhaustion. So your solution was to systematically poison me into taking time off?" My voice remained surprisingly steady despite the white-hot rage coursing through me. "How thoughtful of you both. How long have you been doing this exactly? Was it you who tampered with my food before my presentation at the Advertising Association's Christmas Gala as well?" Griffin's telling silence was the only confirmation I needed. Through the observation window, I could see Margot in her hospital bed, surrounded by medical equipment, her designer clothes replaced by a standard hospital gown. Her usual imperious demeanor had vanished completely, replaced by the unmistakable fear of someone who suddenly realized their carefully constructed world was collapsing around them. "Detective Thorne is already en route," Dr. Hastings informed me quietly. "She specializes in domestic abuse cases and will want comprehensive statements from everyone involved." I nodded, experiencing a strange, almost surreal sense of calm washing over me. After months of doubt, gaslighting, and physical suffering, the truth was finally emerging into the harsh light of day. There was no turning back now. Detective Thorne arrived precisely 45 minutes later, her confident stride and authoritative presence immediately commanding attention in the antiseptic hospital corridor. With over 15 years of experience investigating domestic violence and poisoning cases, she listened with intense focus as I played the incriminating recording from the dinner and displayed the collection of text messages I'd meticulously gathered. "Mrs. Lawson," she said, reviewing her detailed notes, "you mentioned multiple previous hospitalizations following meals with them. Could you elaborate on those specific incidents?" I retrieved my phone once more, opening a password-protected document I'd been painstakingly maintaining for the past several months. The first serious incident occurred in February after a dinner at Margot's house where she insisted on preparing a special family recipe just for me. I experienced severe abdominal cramps, disorientation, and temporary vision problems. The second episode was the tea incident in April, right before my presentation to Parker Media. The most severe was in June, following breakfast at their house before my crucial Blackwell Industries pitch. My voice remained remarkably steady as I continued detailing each event. In each instance, the symptoms were similar yet distinctly different enough that multiple doctors couldn't identify a consistent cause or pattern. Detective Thorne's experienced eyes narrowed as she examined my comprehensive log of dates, specific symptoms, circumstances, and even photographs I'd taken of food and drinks that had seemed suspicious. "You've been systematically documenting everything," she observed with professional admiration. "When did you begin to suspect this wasn't coincidental?" I hesitated momentarily before withdrawing a second phone from my handbag. After the second incident, I started carrying this backup phone with an unregistered number. I used it exclusively to record conversations whenever I was around them. I have several recordings where Margot and Griffin discuss their strategies, though they're deliberately vague in their explicit wording. In one particularly damning recording from 3 weeks ago, Margot's distinctive voice came through with crystal clarity. "The Blackwell account represents millions in billings, Griffin. We cannot allow her to secure that relationship when my department is barely staying afloat." The dosage from last time clearly wasn't sufficient. She still managed to deliver her presentation despite being visibly ill. "Just follow the adjusted plan. A few days of incapacitation should be enough to damage her professional reputation." Griffin's response was equally incriminating. "I've formulated something considerably stronger this time. She definitely won't make it to the awards ceremony. They'll have no choice but to send someone else to accept, which will make her look completely unreliable to the Blackwell executives attending." Detective Thorne's expression hardened perceptibly as she listened to the evidence. Through the window into Margot's room, I could see my sister-in-law was now conscious, looking noticeably diminished and vulnerable compared to her commanding presence at dinner. "The toxicology department is conducting comprehensive screenings," the detective informed me. "Dr. Hastings has already identified several concerning compounds that aren't normally found in food or beverages. We'll need to collect samples from your residents as well as theirs for comparison." A sudden commotion from down the corridor interrupted our conversation. Griffin was arguing vehemently with the security personnel, his voice rising with desperation. "I need to speak with my wife immediately," he demanded loudly. "Lena, please. You've completely misunderstood everything. We were only trying to protect you from yourself." Detective Thorne positioned herself protectively between us. "Mr. Lawson, you're only making your situation worse. We've already uncovered substantial evidence of premeditated. Griffin interrupted with a hollow laugh that echoed eerily through the sterile hospital hallway. "That's absurd. We were simply trying to slow her down. She's been working herself to the point of collapse, taking on every major client regardless of the toll on her health. Margot suggested if we could just force her to take some necessary time off by systematically poisoning her." Detective Thorne's voice cut through his excuses like a scalpel. That's not protection or concern, Mr. Lawson. That's attempted murder. The remaining color drained completely from Griffin's face. Murder, he stammered, genuine shock in his voice. No. That's absolutely not. We never intended to. Then what exactly did you intend? I asked, my voice unnervingly calm even to my own ears. When you carefully prepared that coffee this morning with its distinctive chemical smell, what specific outcome were you expecting? Griffin's inability to answer spoke volumes. Through the glass partition, I could see Margot watching the unfolding scene, her face a complex mask of fear, calculation, and desperate strategizing. I could almost see her analytical mind working furiously, trying to construct some plausible explanation that could rationalize months of deliberate poisoning as a misguided act of concern. We need to confiscate both their phones immediately, Detective Thorne instructed the officers who had now arrived. And I want uniformed personnel posted at each exit. No one leaves until we receive the complete toxicology results and secure the search warrants. Dr. Hastings entered Margot's room, tablet in hand, her expression gravely professional as she reviewed the preliminary test results. Detective Thorne and I followed her inside while Griffin remained in the hallway under close supervision. Margot attempted to adjust herself into a more dignified position in the hospital bed, but the persistent tremors in her hands made even this simple action difficult. The preliminary toxicology report indicates elevated concentrations of multiple concerning substances, Dr. Hastings announced with clinical precision. Most alarming is the presence of a specific pharmaceutical compound, typically used exclusively in controlled laboratory testing. This is definitively not a substance available to the general public through any legitimate channels. Margot's carefully composed face visibly paled. That's completely impossible. Griffin assured me it was just a harmless compound that would cause temporary flu-like symptoms. Temporary flu-like symptoms? Detective Thorne interjected sharply, producing her notebook. Similar to what your sister-in-law experienced repeatedly over the past 6 months, becoming progressively worse with each incident? The door opened as another investigator entered, holding a sealed evidence bag. We discovered these concealed in a locked drawer in Mr. Lawson's office desk at the Meridian Advertising Agency, he reported, presenting several small vials with precise pharmaceutical labeling, accompanied by a notebook containing meticulously detailed notes about specific dosages, observed reactions, and effectiveness ratings. My legs nearly gave way as I comprehended the full horrifying scope and clinical nature of their scheme. You were documenting everything methodically, treating me like some kind of laboratory experiment, I whispered, the realization washing over me in waves of nausea. You're completely misinterpreting everything. Margot protested, though her once commanding voice now wavered noticeably. We simply needed to track what was effective. The initial attempts weren't producing sufficient results. You kept managing to attend meetings and presentations despite the symptoms, so you deliberately and systematically increased the dosages, Detective Thorne concluded grimly, examining the labeled vials. Were you aware these substances can be fatal in higher concentrations? A heavy, damning silence descended upon the room. Through the window, I could see Griffin slumped in a chair in the corridor, his head buried in his hands, the picture of utter defeat. The Blackwell Industries account, I said quietly as the final devastating piece of the puzzle locked into place. This wasn't just about tomorrow's award ceremony, was it? You needed me permanently removed because their executives specifically requested me to lead their expanded marketing campaign after seeing my presentation. Margot's perfectly sculpted features contorted with a volatile mixture of professional jealousy and raw fear. You were systematically dismantling everything I've spent years building. her voice cracked with emotion. I developed those client relationships for over a decade, crafted the perfect professional image despite my department barely staying afloat financially, and then you appear with your underdog story and natural talent, and suddenly everyone wants to work with you instead of me. Griffin promised he could solve the problem. The accusation hung suspended in the sterile hospital air, heavy with its unspoken conclusion. By eliminating me. We never intended to. Margot began defensively, but Dr. Hastings interrupted with clinical precision. The concentration of toxins in the coffee you consume today, the doctor stated firmly, looking directly at Margot with professional gravity, was significantly higher than the trace amounts we've identified in samples from Mrs. Lawson's previous hospital admissions. Had she ingested this specific formulation, the outcome would have been catastrophic, almost certainly fatal within hours. Detective Thorne turned sharply toward her colleague. We need comprehensive search warrants executed immediately for both their residences and workplaces. Also contact the pharmaceutical manufacturer identified on these vials. We need to determine precisely how they obtained these controlled substances and who else might have been involved. Margot collapsed back against her hospital pillows, all pretense of composure completely abandoned. Everything spiraled out of control, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Each time she recovered too quickly, Griffin insisted we just needed one more attempt with a slightly modified formulation. I approached her bedside, maintaining a deliberate distance while my voice remained remarkably steady despite my hands trembling with suppressed emotion. Every single time I became violently ill, every important presentation I struggled through in pain, every potential client relationship damaged, you were both there, clinically observing and documenting my suffering like detached scientists. What kind of monstrous people have you become? The silence that followed felt physically oppressive. From the corridor, I could hear officers formally reading Griffin his rights as additional law enforcement personnel arrived. Margot stared vacantly at her manicured hands, now unable to meet my direct gaze. Detective Thorne, I said, turning resolutely away from my sister-in-law, I'm prepared to provide my comprehensive formal statement whenever you're ready. The trial stretched across 6 grueling weeks, though it felt like an eternity. Each day I sat in the courtroom, maintaining my professional composure while the prosecution methodically constructed their devastating case against Griffin and Margot. The evidence presented was irrefutable. The labeled vials from Griffin's office, their meticulously detailed laboratory-style notes documenting each poisoning attempt, the recorded conversations and encrypted text messages outlining their escalating plans. What affected me most profoundly was observing their dramatically altered demeanor throughout the proceedings. Margot, once the embodiment of polished corporate confidence, appeared diminished and vulnerable in her defendant's chair, her designer wardrobe replaced by conservative courtroom attire. Griffin couldn't bring himself to meet my eyes even once, keeping his gaze fixed resolutely on the floor as expert witnesses detailed the potentially fatal effects of the increasingly potent compounds they had been administering. Dr. Hastings provided particularly compelling testimony, presenting a comprehensive toxicological analysis demonstrating how they had systematically increased the dosages over time, establishing clear intent to cause progressively serious harm. The pharmaceutical laboratory representative confirmed that Griffin had illicitly obtained the compounds through his former college roommate who worked in their research division, a connection that resulted in additional criminal charges for the friend who had supplied the substances. The defendants exhibited a calculated, escalating pattern of behavior, the prosecutor emphasized during her powerful closing statement. This wasn't merely corporate sabotage or professional jealousy, it represented a methodical, documented attempt to poison Mrs. Lawson repeatedly, with a clear progression that would have inevitably resulted in her death. When the verdict was finally announced after 3 days of jury deliberation, I experienced no vindictive satisfaction, only profound relief that the ordeal had reached its conclusion. Both Griffin and Margot were found guilty on multiple serious counts, including attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy, and illegal possession of controlled substances. The judge's resonant voice filled the hushed courtroom. The premeditated, calculated nature of these actions, perpetrated against a family member over an extended period and documented with clinical precision, necessitates the maximum sentence allowable under the law. I watched with complex emotions as they were led away in handcuffs, contemplating how professional jealousy and personal insecurity had transformed two people I had once trusted and loved into unrecognizable strangers. Their careers, social standing, reputations, and freedom all sacrificed in their obsessive attempt to destroy me. 1 year later, exactly 1 year after the conclusion of the trial, I stood confidently at the podium of the National Advertising Excellence Conference, preparing to deliver the keynote address to over 500 industry leaders. The profound irony wasn't lost on me. This prestigious speaking opportunity represented precisely the kind of professional recognition Margot had desperately tried to prevent me from achieving. The Blackwell Industries campaign, which she and Griffin had been so determined to sabotage, had developed into a celebrated case study in effective marketing strategy, opening doors to several additional major clients and establishing me as one of the most sought-after marketing consultants in the industry. True success transcends mere talent or persistent effort, I began, surveying the attentive audience before me. At its foundation lies personal integrity and the cultivation of authentic professional relationships built on mutual trust and respect. I paused deliberately, allowing my words to resonate throughout the hall. Sometimes the most significant obstacles to our professional growth emerge from unexpected sources, even those closest to us. But overcoming such profound challenges ultimately forges us into more resilient, empathetic leaders. Following my presentation, several aspiring young professionals gathered around me seeking guidance. One particularly earnest woman with determination radiating from her eyes asked how I had maintained my professional focus and personal equilibrium throughout such a harrowing experience. I concentrated exclusively on elements within my control, I explained thoughtfully. I methodically gathered evidence, trusted my instincts despite constant gaslighting, maintained detailed documentation, and refused to allow fear or self-doubt to derail my professional aspirations. Later that evening in my hotel suite, I received an email confirmation that Blackwell Industries was extending their contract for an additional 5-year term with a substantial budget increase. I smiled reflectively, contemplating how dramatically different the outcome might have been had I ignored my intuition and consumed that coffee during the fateful dinner 1 year ago. The morning newspaper had featured a small article announcing that Margot and Griffin had been transferred to the medium security facility where they would serve the remainder of their sentences. I didn't read beyond the headline. Instead, I focused my energy on finalizing the innovative campaign strategy for my newest international client, understanding profoundly that the most effective response to those who attempt to undermine you isn't retaliation or bitterness. It's continuing to move forward and achieve excellence despite every obstacle placed in your path.